Good night, everybody. Welcome to this English and extended version, not a version, but event from the AVX lab that we are doing after the great swarm of things that happened last week. And now we are unfolding the idea of the project Dudu Tsuda developed to the festival from this piece called, what is the name of the piece, Dudu? Island? In English, how do you say that?
Life is an utopia.
Life is an utopia. And this piece has the direct connection with the Daisuke invited today, our curator and collector of art, an articulator, and also advocate for the courses in the Japan and Asia. But he's not only in Japan and Asia, he is also in Toronto, Canada. Is it right, Daisuke? Welcome to the AVX Lab conversations. And what else can we talk about this, Lucas?
Well, we had quite an interesting discussion with Dudu Tsuda along the week in which AVX Lab happened, and we had some people that happen to be present here today. It's difficult to say today or tonight or this morning because Daisuke is in the morning and we are in the evening of a Saturday. But this discussion that have to do with Island is an Utopia also triggered the discussion with Fear and Trust, a piece that Dudu Tsuda developed here in Brazil after coming with some thoughts, with some questions he brought after spending some time in Japan. Well, I would go straight to Dudu in order to bring his approach and to bring his questions. But I just wanted to say that this discussion that can be found on the archives of AVX Lab. It lasts more than 1 hour, and we're discussing the developments after this performance, Fear and Trust. And Fear and Trust was presented at Passo das Artes, and it was a sort of dinner. Some of us were present. We had the privilege to be there, like Edith Derdick, and we were challenged with quite an experience. He served us a dinner with some rice coming from Japan, coming from Fukushima, and he explained, and while he was cooking, we could follow his thought about what is it to trust and what is it to have to distrust or to not have confidence enough in some kind of invitation, such as this dinner, such as this serving, such as this gentle offering. So it triggers something that happens today. Can we trust the others? Can we trust? Who can we trust? Can we trust when we are invited to some gathering? Still, when we are taking all the measures for not related to COVID-19, and how can we still trust on the environment, trust on on our friends, or trust on our parents, or trust on our kids, or trust on our government? So it relates to a broader thing. So, Dudu, please help us to introduce the theme and talk about your great project.
Okay, thank you, Lucas, for the introduction and the contextualization. And so I will present this research called and Trust that I start thinking about in Japan, but I finished to develop in Passo das Artes, where I could have this dinner and the privilege to have Lucas and Edith as my guests. So I will share some slides with you. The interesting point that I would like to establish with my presentation is to actually create a link between my performance in the festival itself, the presence of Daisuke, and the field trip project. That's a kind of festival. It's not actually a festival, but it can be an exhibition. I don't know. Daisuke will talk more about it. That somehow brought us all together here. No, so this presentation is more like to give you some hints about how the research started and how it came to this conclusion. Right. So we start this Fear and Trust. So Fear and Trust is an artistic platform that intends to deal with social, political, environmental issues in different cities of the world. The platform aims to sensitize the public with the issue through actions that walk towards a greater understanding, empathy, and identification. A break with the discourse of fear. When we trust, we do not judge, we do not aggress, we do not doubt. We open ourselves, we hear, we understand. So this platform I created, as Lucas already said, I created while I was in Tokyo Wondersite residency program in Tokyo. It was when and where I met Daisuke too. So the motivation of its realization was born of my concerns about the radioactive disasters in Fukushima in 2011, and my will to continue my artistic and emotional dive into the relation of fear and trust. So this is a kind of installation, kind of performance organized by Casa da Lapa, which is a huge collective that they made in a region called Cracolândia, and it's a region that's really similar. I will not say the same thing, but it's similar to Fukushima, as it carries the idea of fear in the representation of the space, right? So I will talk about it later, but just to give us some context about this photo. So I kind of developed a very special friendship with this rice farmer from the region of Fukushima in Japan, who was called Yuji Ishizuka. This is a photo of his small shop. It was a kind of open market, right? Due to our personal proximity, the relation created very deep human stimulus, and that extrapolated the artistic process. How simple decisions based in the relation of fear and trust can change the course of consequences and new actions. So I was kind of intrigued that even if we are talking about a very serious issue, just like nuclear or radioactivity, that has a lot of scientific truths around it. Not only we are open to and susceptible to suggestions and opinions, but also we are influenced by personal relationships that we establish with people in different situations. So I collect some pictures of Yuji. This is his small shop. It's in Daisuke will know this place. It's in front of the UN building. Yeah, it's where we met. When in the residency. So it was the Saturday open market. So he used to sell. We specialized. He was specialized in rice, and you could taste the rice he was selling in his small shop. So Now rereading these issues. Now, so this work this is in 2014. So now I'm rereading this work, research, through another lens. So I came to this author called Shoko Yoneyama, presented by a Brazilian Japanese researcher called Michiko Kano, who couldn't be here today. And it's interesting because the name of the book is called Animism in Contemporary Japan, Voices for the Anthropocene from Post-Fukushima Japan. And in this book, she will point as one of the central aspects of what she calls animism, the valorization of the small forms of life. Okay, so let's go. So Yoneyama argues that the existence of a deeper relationship with spirituality and nature in the small communities affected by the 2011 tsunami and the consequence of the nuclear contamination was central to the process of reconstruction and resumption of these sites. A relationship that she differentiates from some false impressions and simulations concerning Japanese culture. Yoneyama demystifies the idea of an animistic Japanese culture arising from central power in Tokyo, and in contrast to this illusory finding, the author brings the concept of post-animism or postmodern animism, a type of spiritual relationship with nature mediated by a communitarian Shintoism, present in small villages that she will call folk Shintoism. So she actually explains the difference between the Shinto practiced by the government and by the big centers, and the folk Shinto that is present in small communities and small fishing villages. In contrast to Shinto practiced by Japanese government, which boasts sumptuous sanctuaries in the main cities of the country, its folk version has small buildings and with only an image of an animal, in general fox. According to Yoneyama, such small shrines present in rural regions of the countryside concentrate around themselves another form of religiosity, much closer and present in the daily lives of people, being responsible for a sense of community and spiritual collectivity. In the words of the author, the post-animism emerged as a counter-discourse to the modern architectural project by the Japanese state. Small forms of life, the simplicity of rural life, the appreciation of small moments and community meeting, the affective bonds between people and their natural environment are forms of its tangibilization. There's a mistake here. So this is another picture of Yuji. He's a really beautiful smile. In this sense, she conducts her argumentation from the perspective of 4 different Japanese intellectuals trying to recover in their personal memories and reports the formative aspects of this specific type of animism. So Jean-François Lyotard writes in The Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge, that little narratives exist outside scientific knowledge, which are closely related to the knowers and to their internal equilibrium, and which are free from the question of legitimacy as argumentation, and proof. Also a mistake in here. It's the quintessential form of imaginative invention that can create a dissonance or paralogy, a creation of meaning that emerges from the movement against this unestablished way of reasoning, a basis for a new kind of knowledge which produces not the known but the unknown, the kind of knowledge that has until now been outside the legitimate sphere of the social scientific knowledge. This is a video recorded by Yuji, the farmer, that he went to the Daiichi nuclear power plant where we have the accident in Okuma, in Fukushima, in 2020. And he recorded a video I would like to show to you. So I show this video recorded by Yuji because it somehow brings his perception of nature. No, if you go for his Facebook, every day he has a different picture of the region he lives. So his picture he took in March 7th this year, close to his house. He always gives some names in English. I don't know why in English. So this is also in the 7th of March. So this is the map of the region of Fukushima. You know, this is it's a really big and huge area. So that it's one of the important things about that people don't know is that it's more difficult to have contamination in some areas of Fukushima prefecture than if in comparison to other cities that are close to the sea. So actually what I'm trying to say is that there is a relation of map territory, which is based on the fact that there is the experience you have of the place when you go there, and there is the image of the place, the representation of the space, right? So when I say map, I'm considering the representation of the space that's called Fukushima. Yeah? And when I say territory, is my relationship to Yuji, is the fact that I call him every week. So we chat by video calls every week, and I keep on following him by his pictures. We have a real friendship. So this is a real and a consistent relationship with the territory, even if I'm not there, right? And the map is, in contrast, something that is related only to the information we have. So this discussion I start to develop when I was in Japan, and the Fukushima accident and the discussion around it alert me to other facets of its problems. No? For instance, people's reaction to products coming from the region, and this intrinsic relationship between fear and information, what was us talking about. So what really puzzled me at the time was the fact that no one was able to precise the actual geographic extent of the radioactive contamination. People's apprehension and fear were much more associated to the name Fukushima than with scientifically proven information, which led to another problem: prejudice and discrimination towards agricultural producers and in the region, and some types of fish. So this is the map you can see. So Yuji would be close to this lake, and this area is a mountain, so the chance to have some contamination there is really low, because of, I know contamination, they spread with clouds and rain, but clouds, they never climb to the mountain. So the dichotomy between map as a representation of space and territory as the space experience was even more evident in the way the press and the Japanese themselves dealt with the situation. The subject became a kind of taboo, and talking about or dealing with some technical issues concerning food contamination in public came to be seen as an offensive and discriminatory act. So that many products did not contain more information, not contain any more the information of origin. The fear of the information in the map came to be much more evident than the experience and the experience in the territory. This is another picture of Yuji. So map as organization plan the reality from distances and obstacles. No, it's partially Cartesian. So it's a bad translation. It's the Cartesian space, notion of space, under the Cartesian notion of time. So the idea of state, the idea of central power. This is what I call map. When I say territory, I'm thinking about the composition plan in Deleuzian philosophy, which means multiple realities becoming, which the translation is devir, durational temporality, which would point to Bergson, and with interweaves memory. So memories, sensations, feelings, and encounters in the same flow. What is the description of the durational temporality in Bergson? The idea of community and the idea of local community. So I'm talking about the performance dinner. So in this performance, as Lucas already said, I cook in front of my guests. And while I'm cooking, I'm explaining this story I'm talking to you about Yuji. So I showed some pictures. I have the rice that he gave to me as a masterpiece of art. I put in a kind of a special place so that to bring the light of art to this a small pack of rice. And by doing so, I give all attention to this rice and to the conduction of our conversation, our meal. So dinner is a performance that proposes an informal meeting with 8 guests to discuss the relation of fear and trust in the subject of food, radioactive contamination in Japan. By serving Japanese food with rice from the region of Fukushima, Japan, the artist aims to provoke social, political, environmental discussions and reflections on the subject and present his conceptual motivation for the creation of the platform. In this sense, establish a relation of trust as he contextualizes his guests. This is the pack of rice. This is some pictures that we took in our meal. So I keep on talking. Actually, this performance was born by the real situation, because after I met Yuji, I was searching for rice, and I went to his small shop. So when I went there, I saw lots of small packs of rice, but they were really expensive for me. So I keep on talking to him, so that maybe I may buy it because he's very nice. So I create a real relationship with him. So he started to share some photos of his farm, and I just have a direct identification with my grandparents' farms and way of life. So somehow we became really close. And then because of this relationship, I started to create a really deep relationship of trust. And when I was about to pay for the rice, I just asked him where this rice come from, and he told me it came from Fukushima. And by that moment, the word Fukushima, the information Fukushima, create a kind of reaction in my body, and I couldn't buy the rice anymore. And I create a stupid phrase, a stupid word, or something else. I just say something to him, a stupid excuse, and I went home feeling really, really bad. So I was interested about why I did it, why I felt like that, why I was so afraid about Fukushima, and why I felt so bad by doing so. So I kept visiting Yuji from time to time, and in one day I was going there to invite him for a performance, and I have my album to give him as a gift, and he had a pack with him too, and he gave it to me as a gift. Inside the pack there was this rice pack and some potatoes and so on. And so I decided to, and my mother was coming to my house that night, and I was supposed to do a dinner. She was traveling with some friends, her friends, né? And so I cooked these potatoes and rice and everything, and I made up rice kare. It's a Japanese, very traditional and homemade plate. And another plate with another things, right? And when they came to the residency, I explained all this situation that I explained to you, and they decided to eat at last, because I told them, well, I just have this gift from Yuji, and I think I must eat it because he gave it to me. It was a really small, really special gift, and I think I should eat it. I studied radiation issue for this last month. I understand many things, understand the risks, but I think we can trust in this rise. And everybody went in the same way. So we have a dinner, and then I decided to create this situation, a performance, which was this one that Lucas and Egypt participated. I follow some instructions, so I introduce introduce the subject. I tell them about the relation with Yuji, the same thing I did here. I warn them about the risks of consuming contaminated food, and then I serve the meal and I conducted the conversation. So I follow these 4 instructions, and I always have the same ingredients, right? And I'm talking all about fear and trust because it was an introduction to come to so that we can understand this new piece called Island, Life is an Utopia. So I prepare a small explanation of this series. So this series, Life is an Utopia, it's a series of pieces of installations that questions the growing devaluation of life in face of the financial market, manifesting the recent environmental catastrophes and the systematic dismantling of social human rights in Brazil, right? Based on propositions of contraposition between the blunting and the contemplative. In the series, the artist explored Japanese cultural term ma as an opening to the environment, to everything that surrounds us and we do not control, proposing a critical view of the system through a resilient perspective. So ma is this kanji, it's an ideogram, right? And inside the image of the ideogram itself brings the sensation of ma, which is a space, time-space. It's a time-space sensation. It's not only a sensation. It's really specific. It would be a durational sensation or a kind of becoming, devir in Portuguese, or a meta-stable. It's a meta-stable becoming, or a becoming meta-stable, devir meta-estável, if you want to mention Simondon. So in this series, I presented 2 pieces. This one is Robalo in Prata Inflamado. So they discuss the contamination of the beaches in northeast part of Brazil. It's a piece of metal that has a microphone, and when you just touch it, it creates a really huge sound. It will be like this, the sound. So it reminds the sound of the gong, which is a traditional instrument in shrines and temples in Japan that carries the sensation of ma in the sound. Then there's this other previous work called Forest Air Becoming Forest that I presented in Minhocão, which is a highway in the center of São Paulo. And I better present the video. So in this work, I recreate a forest soundscape that would be a reproduction of the forest that would be in this place. So I research the animals that used to live in this area or could be living in this area, and I recreate a soundscape of the area, and I position in 30 speakers around this highway. So it's around 250 meters of occupation. And while you're walking, you have some different sounds because every 2 or 3 speakers you have a difference. So, and around it keeps on playing 10 hours by day, and you have 10 hours of different sound. It's a really real soundscape of 10 hours. So this is the ILHA island they're presenting in AVX Lab. This is a drone image. So it's a very simple action. I have 8 performance. Each of them, they are using these backpacks, right? And these backpacks, they are equipped with sound, and it will sound the sound of the sea that I record in Nagoya, the city that has one of the biggest concentrations of nuclear power plants in Japan or even the planet. And so the idea of the action is that these 8 people, they will meet each other in a public space. They will create a circle. They'll give their hands like this image, right? We have here. So I have this image here. And then they will look to each other, and they will walk back 5 to 7 steps, and they will create another circle, and they will give their backs to the center of the circle, and they will play audio. I made a surround mix, so each one has a different audio. So you have the sensation of the 8-point surround sea sound. It keeps on turning, keeps on turning. So this is the sensation I present, no? So Island Life as an Utopia is a sound urban intervention that deals with the complex theme of radioactive contamination of the seawater in Japan. This is I just explained before. So this is some photos of the action. In the action, we use these suits because it's the cinema norms or security norms for security rules for shooting in the pandemics. So we follow all the rules that they establish, but somehow the way we are dressed actually brings much more than the security rules, but also the reality we're living, right? So I'm talking about water contamination, but we are living an air contamination problem in the whole world. So somehow doing this work now give us even deeper and profound notion of anthropocene perspective and disaster. And this is the image that we produce a 3D video for YouTube, which you can find in AVX Lab archives with a 3D camera. And so this is it's not the real action because it's not a real public space, it's an abandoned area. But because we couldn't make in a public space with the pandemic, so we choose this area. And in the masterpiece became this 3D video that we can find. So by now I finished my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Great to do. Great. And the project got really interesting because the idea to build this 3D experience, it's not a 3D, it's a 360 experience with a 360 video camera that caught not only the video but the audio. So the experience is to put the person inside this surrounding experience of. And this is also with the technology of ambisonic. This word doesn't mean much, but what it happens is that when you look one side or the other, the sounds are related to the ambient. So it's it's before of all a sound experience, much more than a 360 video experiences, it's a 360 sound experience. This is what I think it's most interesting to recall about this piece that you can find in our website. And well, thank you, Dudu. And I would like to not forget to honor the invitation of Daisuke made by Dudu Tsuda to come here and discuss and presented his spectrum of work, which also related to these backpacks. But I'm very curious to know about your things, Daisuke. Where are you? Just for...
Okay, thank you very much, Demetrio. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I am Takeya, joining you from Suwa, Nagano Prefecture, Japan, which is actually known for folk Shintoism. It is called Suwa animism. And I'm here because I'm directing a performance art festival, and our theme is called Escape City, escaping from the cities and coming back to the nature. So that's why I'm here joining with you. I'd like to share the screen now. Okay. So I call my presentation Circulate, International Networking at Crisis. In this presentation, I will discuss how international networking in art can help people at a time of crisis. I would like to talk about long-term resilience and maintaining momentum by introducing two projects that I have led at disaster-affected areas in Japan and Indonesia. And I'm repeating what Dudu had presented. So this is the island of Japan, and the yellow section is the Fukushima Prefecture. And Fukushima Prefecture is quite large. And the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant is located at the far east of the prefecture, touching the Pacific Ocean. So some parts of Fukushima Prefecture, in fact, have much lower radiation than Tokyo or other neighboring prefectures. So that can be related to the trust that Lucas introduced at the beginning. We are going to discuss about later. And I would like to showcase some of my case studies. The first one is the field trip project and field trip project Asia that Dudu has taken part. And this is the image from Onagawa town. The 97% of the town was swallowed by tsunami. So everything was gray, and we wanted to bring in some colors into the area because their workplace has been gone, their schools have been gone, and their playgrounds have been gone. So we had no place to go to. People had no place to go to. So we just wanted to bring in some colors. It didn't have to be recognized as art, but we wanted to create a place where people could hang out. And these artworks with the backpack, they were situated in the temporary evacuation housings. And they're very small containers that all the family, like member of like 4, 8, whatever numbers, they were sort of canned in small housings, no playgrounds and no work. And parents started drinking, and kids have nowhere to go to. So we brought these for people to hang out. And the children, as in this photograph, played with those backpacks. And they're pre-elementary school students. So like backpacks seem very appealing to them. Then their grandparents started joining because their grandchildren are playing around there and what's going on. Then we have created a new community of the affected victims. Then we started thinking about the project in terms of the affected areas and non-affected areas. The cities like Tokyo and Osaka in Japan, they returned to normal just a few months after the disaster. And I was like, wow, how could you be so ignorant and careless? But there was nothing we could do. Still, there are like major broadcasting about disaster affected areas, but people had no relation to it. So we brought those backpack artworks to travel to those places instead of them coming to the affected areas. And those backpacks people can carry so that their pain, their struggles, people carry together. So it's quite significant. And also those backpacks are used for elementary school. It's a metaphor for affection, learning, and childhood memories. And we did bring this project to Canada as well. And we had major museum exhibitions as well. So this project can be working in community setups and also at the museums too. And then we had looked at Asia. In Asia, there are many natural disasters happening almost like, every time of the year. So we did travel the project and try to localize the theme of the project. And these are some of the participants of the projects. And Dudu, when you were in Tokyo, you remember some of these people, right? Yeah. And this is how the project started. So disaster affected areas, we carried the backpacks and walked around and tried to remember the history. Then in Asia, we have exhibited in the museums, and university students, high school students, they all came and enjoyed being part of the project. And by carrying the artwork on their back, they became part of the artwork. They're not participants anymore. They became the artwork. And their conversations, whatever they talk about, their breakfast or whatever, they became part of the artwork. And this is Indonesia. Banda Aceh were struck by tsunami in 2004, and 200,000 people were killed. Then we went to Philippines, were affected by the typhoon Haiyan. We did the workshop with children who were afraid of rain. So they couldn't go out of the rain because they're so afraid of the typhoon. So that people interact with the artwork, and we had created a community. And because we have traveled the project, the community became larger, and it became some sort of like a new language. And it did also go to Myanmar now under the coup, military coup, and our participating artists are no longer able to communicate with outside world, and they cannot present their identity because it could be life-threatening. And this is the picture at the Yangon Central train station. And now I would like to showcase my second example, Yellow Memories. Palu, Sulawesi, Indonesia was struck by tsunami 3 years ago. And I went there and collaborated with an architect and artist there and tried to create some sort of community with this monument. And this is the scale of the monument. And what we did was we encouraged the local people to collect debris and bring them together into one location. And we had connected them, then painted them yellow. Very simple and easy. So everybody could participate, like children helped us, and everybody, whoever had a time, joined us and just did this simple thing. And it became like a large installation and memorial. And what's important about this project is that it's a community-centered project that it's no longer art, and it is a memorial. However, it is meant to be fading away. And the picture on the left is when we completed the memorial, and the picture on the right is a few months later. Because of the weather, like a yellow color is fading, and some local people started taking part of the installation and brought back to their home to rebuild their houses or something. So over time, those memorials can disappear. So it's not about the thing. It's about how we remember those incidents and how we pass on those experiences into the next generations. And finally, I'd like to showcase the coalition that we have created in Asia in response to the coup in Myanmar, and it's called Transnation, Transnational Coalition for the Arts. And artists, cultural workers, and any sort of like individuals and art institutions from over 40 nations had joined us. And I'd like to show this video right now. I hope you can hear.
Nayandaga Mahamay Pubanson and Jimiago, Chachin Luanibadi.
Luraya at the Nejati Murigo, Chaulan Nijin Apo, Chachin Dompian.
І демократичні свободи наших колег-художників, працівників культури.
Людей з усього світу.
เรายืนหยัดในความเป็นน้ำหนึ่งใจเดียวกันกับการต่อสู้ของเหล่าผู้ถูกกดขี่โดยระบอบเผด็จการ
लोकतंत्र और सामाजिक न्याय हम सभी कलाकारों सांस्कृतिक कार्यकर्ताओं की रक्षा के लिए समर्पित है
dan rakyat akan melawan apa-apa bentuk penindasan oleh negara dan kami akan terus mempertahankan kebebasan hak sivil
dan menjunjung tinggi demokrasi rakyat. Pada kesempatan ini, Transnation menuntut
il violento colpo di Stato dei militari in Myanmar intende ripristinare una dittatura militare.
Wakasan ng kanilang karahasan at martial law. Hinihikayat namin ang nagkakaisang nasyon at pamayanang international upang
verurteilen Sie die illegitime Regierung der Militärjunta in Myanmar.
Myanmar の2020年11月8日の選挙結果を尊重した国民民主連盟 NLD の復活。
Exact accountability and justice for the victims of Myanmar military violence.
Подпомагане и подкрепа на документацията за всички нарушения на правата на човека.
Sensibiliser et augmenter la pression internationale pour résoudre immédiatement la crise au Myanmar.
Defendemos estas demandas en solidaridad con el pueblo de Myanmar.
So we have gathered and created the manifesto together, and we did the poster campaign with different languages so that we can reach more audience or participants or colleagues. And the important thing is that Burmese people, the people in Myanmar, inspired us by their bravery. So it's not like outside world trying to help them, but this action movement, it's called Spring Revolution. It started from Myanmar. Now they cannot continue. So we are supporting them to continue what they have started. And also we created this sort of like participatory projects. It's called Open Call. And this woodcut print is created by Panglop Slap. From Malaysia. They're a pretty credible art collective from Malaysia. They're joining international biennials right now. Then every day we have put up new posters so that we can maintain the momentum because it has been 3 months already and they have internet surveillance, so they cannot continue what they have been doing. So we're trying to stay connected with them. Then we sort of promote what they need. And this poster on the left-hand side is to free the captured activists in Malaysia. So it's not just about Myanmar. There are many crises, including Brazil, we need to face. So because of the pandemic, we're threatened by the similar conditions right now. And I think we cannot be ignorant anymore. And the newspaper on the right-hand side is the coverage of the German artists doing some protest and performance art in relation. And we have this sort of conference every month. So if any of you want to join us, please join us. Maybe you can host, and maybe you can give us the theme for us to discuss or to create the movement together. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Very inspiring, very inspiring. I think we need to be inspired. Once we get rid of all the mess we have in Brazil today, we need to be inspired again. We need to avoid ignorance. We need to go deep on research. We need to get to rebuild. So I'd like to again share some thoughts we had at the beginning of this chat, and we had a couple of weeks ago during the AVX lab, how this experience can help, how art can help or can increase our confidence, can increase or bring back, better saying, bring back our trust on the other. And what I don't know, Demetri, if we open the discussion for all, but I would like to address a question. One of the questions we discussed back to Daisuke, which is this reconstructions Japan showed us to Occidentals many times, in many occasions. We are sort of jealous about how good you do on reconstructions. How can you think art and Japan and research like you presented us can help such a dismantle society we had today in Brazil? I guess you were a bit informed about this, and I will not spend some time informing so much about the disruption, the dismantled society, and the lack of promises, the lack of future we have today.
Well, that's, I think he answered to you. It was...
Yeah, it's a question addressed to you, Daisuke.
So sorry, I was waiting for everybody. Sorry, I was trying to be.
This could be a good round because in fact what Lucas brought is something that touches very much. Maybe the silence is about that too. But the dynamics that Daisuke proposed, that maybe we make a round of questions, could deliver more easily a discussion afterwards. Does anybody else would like to bring some questions?
Se alguém quiser falar em português, eu traduzo.
Isso, é uma boa.
If you don't want to speak in Portuguese, we can translate.
Yeah.
Fernanda.
I wrote some stuff here, but are not questions, more quotes or dialogues to put together or to inspire or to discuss, but not exactly questions. I don't know if it's the right time now. What do you think? Does anybody has questions?
I have one.
Patricia.
I have to do two. Because, yes, you're talking about trust, and you are living in world, but mainly in Brazil, a moment that is full of fake news. And fake news goes through lies, create fear. You're talking about trust and fear. So both are related. But there is a process that is different between one and another. And I think there is a new phenomenon. I'm not sure. I would like to discuss a little bit about this. Wasn't put yet. It's something that is going on. We don't know how is it still. I think so, because it's strange. It's strange and full of new configuration, shapes, and an aesthetic also. So I'd like to listen something about, because, for example, in a stacked way, when you show us the rice, this Japanese rice, it's so beautiful. The guy, the rice, the package, everything very well carried, artisan things. So different from fake news. It's a digital process, not industrial, but in large scale. So, but I think that approach is just this. I don't want to talk more because I don't know if I will reach in a place, but I think that you have an interesting question, this. And to Daisuke. And it's very interesting your international network that you built, and how you connected children, because I think that's very important, because it's important to create new memories. If you are in the same place, the war, the difference, the killing of people will continue. But with the children, I think the children are still the future. So, and you created objects and distributed to them. And this object may works as a piece reference, a friendly that built friendly relationships. I'd like how to know details about how, if you develop any kind of relationship with the children, if you went there again, and to know how they are exchanging experience, to know more about this experience with the children, because I think that's very important. Thank you very much for the presentation, both of you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, I tend to be forgetful, so can I answer to Patricia before you do? Thank you. The relationship with children, when we started the project 8 years ago, right after the disaster, children went crazy for our project because they were just simply looking for playgrounds, something to play with. Their toys, their schools, their playgrounds, everything's gone, nothing to do. So when they saw the artwork, they just interacted, and their interpretation is very original. So I made them the curators of the project. So they sort of like decided how to install the artwork. So we had a very good relationship. But after a few years, because of the disaster, there are, I think, local schools and a therapist thought about trauma release and giving them happy memories more and more and more, so that they can forget about trauma and they can forget about the fear, so that they try to forget about what was happening at right after the tsunami disaster. So I met some of them like 5 years after they graduated from elementary school to like higher schools, and they said they didn't remember us. And it was quite shocking to us because they enjoyed it so much. But I think that's good. And that was a good lesson for us too, that they forgot. So that's maybe partially a good thing. Maybe they're facing forward, they're moving forward. So our projects were not aimed to sort of make it like a gorgeous, memorable memorial, monument, or art or masterpiece. We just wanted them to use us to sort of like go forward. So whatever the reasons, if they went forward, they forgot about us, and that's a successful thing. And having said that, we need to pass on the knowledges and memories to next generations. And many of the school children now were born after the tsunami disaster. So they did not experience. They only hear the stories from their grandparents, parents, like artists and books and movies. And they have no idea. So how can we communicate with them? And some ways in Indonesia, they have a disaster education, but it's sort of like set up, staged. So it's sort of like a very scary images of broken buildings and car floating in the ocean. Then children get scared, and those things won't be remembered by children. But our project, Filter Project, they're quite diverse. They're pretty, and you can choose their favorites. So their experience become very personal and very small. And many times they're not directly associated to the disaster, the crisis. So that also helps to for them to remember in a way different from disaster education, you see. So I think we have sort of created the trust with children and communities, and that was good. And I think as in this, the theme of this conversation, trust and fear, they're like, I think they're intermingled and connected. But once we have the trust, I think it sort of elevates us to the different level of communication. And when we have the fear, so maybe we sort of focus on like scientific facts, and they're like sort of like different individuals. But when we pass that point, I think we're sort of using the common new language that we can understand each other. And that, I think that is quite crucial when you are involved with the communities, and especially with children.
Hi.
Vai, sim.
I like to try to speak in English. It's not so well, but I will try. I'm thinking, I don't know it's right, but the sense of the spirituality, the roots of the, not the religion, but the sense of the, como fala espiritualidade, spirituality.
Spirituality, yeah.
I think it's very strong in Japan. I don't know, maybe it's in the DNA, como fala DNA?
DNA, yeah.
Yeah,
DNA.
exactly. And I could realize that work shows the teeny edge among ethical, poetical, political attitudes. And maybe these roots relate to the connection with the earth as kind of manifestation of the spiritualidade, maybe develops of the sense of trusting. And Tá dando para entender o que eu estou tentando falar? And I like to hear from you about these connections, because here in Brazil, as the Lucas had said, I think the lacks of the future and the lacks of the sense of trusting, it's very, very connected to the it's a kind of political strategic way of dismounting our roots. And when Dudu said about Shinto, I was thinking about the original cultures here in Brazil. It's growing up again. So I'd like to hear about you, if you can tell us if there is any kind of connecting of these places. Ficou claro minha pergunta?
Yes, I guess so. It did. And please let me allow to add something that is very much connected to what you said. At the beginning of the pandemic last year, by March, April, there was a popular article by Byung-Chul Han. Byung-Chul Han, Korean thinker, is very popular in Brazil. I don't know if it sounds like strange to you, Daisuke, but Byung-Chul Han was translated his books has been translated in achieving successful. But he mentions the Confucianism as a key point regarding the way of controlling coronavirus in Asia, especially in China, maybe in Japan and Korea. But he mentions spirituality, as Edith said, but it brings also the trust on the government, which has little to do with spirituality. So I emphasize Edith's question in order to see what do you think Confucianism is also related to this kind of trust, of heritage trust.
I guess Edith and Lucas, I think you have raised a very critical, important questions. I don't know if I am good enough to answer those questions, but I have some personal takes. And as I said before, I am joining from Suwa area, and it's quite known for folk animism or postmodern animism. So they're very much related to nature. And in short, it's pre-Shintoism. Their nature god is still relevant in these areas. And that's why we are here trying to do performances in the mountains and try to talk with people. And on contrary to Tokyo or other big cities in Japan, people are sort of living normal. And I'm staying in a hostel in an old house. And I was so shocked that I would be the only guest. I was assuming, but it's packed. And last night there are like big parties everywhere in town, in this small town. And like, come on, it's pandemic happening. But people are wearing masks and being sort of careful and respectful to each other. So they are not too worried about spreading the disease. And I was like, wow. So it's quite different from what's happening in Tokyo and what's the authorities doing. I think people have sort of like doubts about authorities because they say that they will sort of solve the situations immediately. Then they haven't done that successfully for over a year, and people are frustrated. And we are under the emergency situation called by the government. But how long is the emergency? You know, it's over a year now and still emergency. So emergency is new normal now. And the Confucianism in relation to this coronavirus, I am not too sure how successful Japan is comparing to Korea or Taiwan. And we know that Taiwan has succeeded really well how to sort of like enclose the coronavirus, and people don't wear masks there. But in Japan, I think the infected numbers are increasing and going down a bit, but still going upwards. So it's no different from, I guess, America's as well. But numbers of infected are lower than America's. However, we're maybe not as successful as you may be imagining. So I don't know if I am answering the question. Maybe Dudu can answer the question.
Well, nice, Daisuke. Really interesting what you're saying and what both Edith, Lucas, and Patricia asks, because it's a very delicate issue that we are talking. Because we were discussing too, me and Daisuke, about these issues, and I learned a lot about how Japanese in general now are dealing with this post-disasters sensation, no, and information especially. So also when I read this author called Yoko Yoneyama, I could have more like approach to this different way of create a relationship with the world itself and with nature and a disaster like a tsunami or even the pandemics. So I understand when Edith was telling us about how the perception that having forest guardians or sea guardians or nature guardians in general somehow brings another kind of relationship in the society and the ambient itself. I was discussing the last time we talked in Portuguese about how some authors in Brazil are also thinking the same way as Shoko Yoneyama is thinking in Japan. So I mentioned Krenak, which is now a very famous intellectual, and which is not a ordinary intellectual. He is not from university. He's not a scholar. He's an indigenous intellectual. He lives in. He doesn't live in cities. So it's a very special moment that we are listening to these people, and we are having the privilege to understand a different way of producing knowledge. So what Daisuke was telling is really interesting because and showing in his projects, because it's all about understanding and listening what the local communities are saying or are doing or organizing. And somehow learning more than trying to propose. I think this is the major step we are all passing through now, is that we just realize that our knowledge that comes from Western society or the Western society in Japanese culture, that would be the state and in Tokyo, for instance, that we're understanding that this kind of knowledge, it's no longer is enough to understand the complexity of our world, and this kind of knowledge is no longer suitable for the moment. It had never been suitable for any moment, but right now that we are passing through this situation that Lucas pointed very well, that it lacks future, it lacks the sensation of future, it lacks the sensation of having hope. The factual thinking, the scientific thinking put us apart from each other, like Daisuke really explained us. So whenever we are in the energy of trusting each other, it's I feel like energy, because it's really an energy, right? Because we change somehow something in our brain that everything goes fine, and so we can do things together really, and people, they support each other. So I think this kind of sensation, I wouldn't say thinking, but I think it's more like a sensation, because when you really feel trust for someone and you feel people are trusting you, you feel like a real deep love, right? So in this kind of this state of love, this is actually what brings us life, right? So when everything is done to thinking, or when everything is done to scientific evidence, or everything is done to data, we lost this connection with our living being, right? So we lost this connection with this kind of love that would somehow make a really delicate structure among us all as a planet. So, and normally this kind of thinking, which is more associated to this idea of totality, of living is a planet, is more usual in animist societies and post-animist societies, and especially societies that they have a cosmology that had never developed towards the idea of religion. So indigenous society and ancestral societies in many parts of the world. So I think we never were so interested about this kind of knowledge, this kind of specificity. And what Daisuke brings in his research is really interesting, because he's really in touch with this diversity, which is Asian society, because each country has a different alphabet, a different way of talking. So, okay, we have this in South America, in Latin America, but not in this intensity, right? Because it's really different. They are really different among themselves. And this, I think, the Daisuke's research for us that lives in South America is very interesting, because somehow it points us different perspectives of trust, different perspectives of life, of love and life, and in a area of the planet that we've never been, that most of us had never been. So it's just like Edith said, it's a very beautiful invitation, or just like Lucas said, it's a inspiration for us also to desire something better for our own country, right? And by doing so, I would like to maybe see, Nelly maybe wants to make a question. Nelly, você quer fazer uma questão e a gente traduz para você?
Olha, eu fico muito... obrigada, Dudu, mas para mim está difícil, inclusive, de acompanhar, e eu acho que eu não tenho... Eu tô junto, mas tá difícil de entender, sabe? Então, eu entendo pela metade, e aí fica difícil. Mas uma coisa é muito clara, né, que essa última discussão é que a cultura japonesa, ela está muito, né, ela está muito, tem uma outra constituição, e essa coisa do shintoísmo, quando eu estudei a história das religiões, o shintoísmo vem lá do período da Grécia dos deuses múltiplos, é uma das religiões que vem desse período, e a espiritualidade japonesa acho que é diferente, e a gente tem uma sociedade muito massacrada, né, assim, é uma invasão, 500 anos, é uma invasão portuguesa e 300 anos de escravidão, quer dizer, eu acho que isso aqui é uma outra coisa que a gente tem que caminhar, né, mas bom, enfim, é isso, um pouco. Obrigada, Dudu.
Thank you, Nelly. So
Daisuke, just to contextualize, Nelly was speaking in Portuguese. She's saying that she's picking up not everything, but because the subject is dance. But she just commented that in Brazil is very different from Japan. Shintoism is a religion very old, before the beginning of Brazil. And Brazil started with an European invasion, and afterwards we have 300 years of how can I say, slavery, which in fact did not stop. I would like to comment, if you allow me, Dudu, some side conversations that is happening here in the chat, because we talked about Rio Doce, which is the name of a river that happens here in Brazil, which is a place that the philosopher indigenous from Brazil lives close to this river, and there was a dam with how can I say that, with the metal and the waste of mining company.
Tailings of iron ore exploitation.
Exactly. And this dam was condemned. In fact, but they knew it was condemned, but they didn't stop to mine. And it was so huge that when the dam collapsed, the mud crossed a whole state, getting from the mountains to the sea, and almost killed the river. So it was a crime. It was not a disaster. Okay, it was a catastrophe. But we see that in Brazil. One thing that I feel very much from your work, Daisuke, and this lack of perspective that Lucas said and that we feel here, is some question that I would like to address you, and mainly is about the feeling of reconstruction and the cure that we have nowadays. You look for it, getting closer to the nature, something that somehow it is go back to something like it was the past, but in fact the nature was always there, and we forgot the nature, and now we have to reconnect it. So I would like to address this question to you, Daisuke, and Dudu, about this connection with the nature and the people. How do you feel that as a form of cure, and how it can be used? How can we help you, if I can?
How he can help us?
He's doing the right path. I just would like to go after.
We're fucked up, Daisuke. Yeah. Let's say we're fucked up, totally fucked up.
Actually, unfortunately, I would have to agree with Lucas very much, unfortunately. And thank you, Demetrio, for addressing that question. And yes, we are very disconnected to nature, and we need to go back. And we are part of nature, because we are all born, but we are all going to die someday. And I think then our next generations are going to live their lives, and the next generations over and over. So it's a circulation, and the nature is a circulation as well. And we are not part of the circulation. That seems to me the problem. And I'm not saying that we should all go back to the primitive way of living, otherwise we won't be connected, right? We have internet. That's why we can talk now, and we share the same languages. So there's some advantages as well. However, we cannot getting away from being part of the nature. And that's for sure. We cannot become machines. Or maybe in the future, we all become AI and, we leave our bodies maybe in the future. It's unfortunate, but that could be a possibility too. And I think in terms of reconstructions and the cure, and I think we cannot cure ourselves, but within the environment, we heal ourselves. So we're not like so almighty to fix things by ourselves. Like we need friends to talk to when we have struggles. We need families when we have a hard time. So we cannot cure by ourselves. We need to sort of count on the environment. And I think the concrete jungles, buildings, they don't help us too much. But trees and flowers, maybe they help us more. So maybe we should sort of like return to nature for sure, so that we feel more peaceful. And very surprisingly, because of the pandemic, I was in quarantine in Canada, in Toronto, a big city, the biggest city or the biggest village in the world. I was surrounded by the buildings, but I missed nature so much. And now I'm back in Japan, and I started renting a countryside, like a countryside house, and I'm thinking of starting farming. And I don't know why I'm doing it. And many people think that, why are you doing it? That's crazy. What's wrong with you? But I just wanted to just touch, soil and, maybe create some eggplants and stuff, that seemed very appealing to me. And I don't know why. And I was thinking about like art market, like maybe 2 years ago. Or what about New York? What about art fairs? And those are the things I was talking about. But now I talk about like tomatoes, what's the best way to create tomatoes? That's what I'm talking about right now. So it's a very interesting change. No one told me to do this, but I just want to do it. And I think I'm part of the nature that way.
That's amazing, Daisuke. Because I'm also living in the mountains. So I moved to my grandmother's house. Lucas and Bianca, they not moving to the farm, but they spend half the time in the farm and half the time in São Paulo. So I think many of us are also thinking that way. Edith's daughter moved to a city close to mine. So she's also in the countryside, in the mountains. I started planting broccolis and couve, which is a Brazilian plant we eat. So I have 20 broccolis plants and 10 couve plants, and I have some tomato. I'm organizing a really big garden. The translation for horta is garden in English, so it's just like jardim. So I'm in the same mood as you. I'm more interested about going to the open market that I go every Saturday and to talk to the producers to understand how they do to grow some stuff, because they know all the hints, all the tricks, they know everything. So I spend a lot of time with them trying to understand how to make my plants grow faster or stronger without pesticides and anything. And they know all the hints. So I think it's like you. I don't know why I came to sensation. We kind in Brazil, we all bankrupt last year. I was one of them. So I moved to the countryside because I was bankrupt and I didn't have money anymore for rent. So that's why I came here. But at the same time, I was willing to leave, just like you. So it's really interesting to hear from you this and know that you're in the mountains, especially because you're researching folk Shinto in this city. And I think that's this could be somehow what Erika, she just posted in the chat, that we don't have any Asian traditions here in Brazil, but because of that, it's more difficult for us to restart this community sensation. But somehow we are more aware about indigenous traditions and knowledge. So, and as Nelly once said to me, she really thinks that indigenous ancestral traditions, they're not very different from Japanese ancestral traditions in terms of community thinking and collectivity and relation to nature. So both somehow imagines nature as something like a deity, so there's a spiritual relation and respect, so that in a long term you preserve, not because only you need to preserve because it's a resource, but we preserve because it's a living being. It's something precious for you. It's a sanctuary, so you will not destroy it. So somehow we understand Krenak, this indigenous intellectual, as a kind of savior, because he is the only one who is pointing to this direction for so much time. And he was pointing this direction since the 80s, but nobody would listen to him. And we listen to him every day. And everybody is really excited about his texts, about his lectures and so on. And he keeps on traveling to Europe. And I think it's, I would say it's not only an intellectual movement, but it's an emotional movement. I think everybody's feeling that way. Feeling the need to be hopeful. And somehow living in the countryside makes us more hopeful. And I think it's knowing that everybody here in this room somehow it's moving to that direction. It's really, how can I say, makes our life more comfortable. That somehow there is a connection that we can find. And what you said about the relation with, for instance, tomatoes, somehow brings a much deeper connection than art festivals and residencies and titles and everything that we were used to as artists, right? So I think the artist's life is also competitive, is also neoliberal, is also destructive. And our relation to nature, in contrast, no, we don't compete to each other. We share information because we both want to have broccolis or we both want to have tomatoes. So I think it's more like it's more cozy to have all my artist friends as my tomato friends or as my broccolis friends.
And maybe Vittorio or Lucas or somebody else mentioned at the beginning that we have no good expectations for the future. And my take it's a positive thing that we're finally getting out of the 20th century. We are in 21st century, but we have kept on living the 20th century way. So we are not yet 21st century, but now we have to move on to the 21st century. And what kind of century do we want to build? So it's not reconstruction of the 20th century, the better version. We are not recycling. It's not postmodernism. So we are creating something new. That's why we don't envision a clear future now. Of course, because we haven't experienced that yet. So it's good that we go way back to animism and like Amazon, like elders or like Shintoism or whatever, like a former like useful knowledges. And one good thing is that we have internet and we can share the knowledge. We can acquire new knowledges and we can share. And we can coexist and collectively think about it. And before it was individual thinkers and people only following, but now we are collectively make decisions. And so I think we can look forward to the 21st century, a real one.
The things you
Amazing.
said it's very, very close to the Krenak has said lately. Have you know Ailton Krenak, Daisuke? Have you know something about him?
Heard, yes.
Yeah, because the things you said, the future is now, it's just now. The future is not in the future. The future is now. But the question is, in Brazil, it's very difficult to develop this community sense. We are very, very desmontado, né? And for me as an artist, I always think how you can connect ethical, poetical, and political attitudes. For me, it's a kind of mystery, really, because sometimes as palavras de ordem, como que fala palavras de ordem? São palavras de ordem, né?
Keywords.
Yeah. Sometimes very, very far from the sensitive language, you know?
I think that I'm an interdisciplinary artist, meaning I do paintings, performances, and curatings and art projects. So like Dudu makes tomatoes, I don't think Dudu is experienced tomato maker, but he does that. He can do that too. On the same way, maybe children can create great art as well. So we used to have like subject experts, but now because we can acquire the knowledge and steps how to learn things easier, so we don't need to be subject experts as much as we used to before. So we can try new things. We can try something unknown. So I think those boundaries, like genres, can be broken. And I do performance art, and I talk with many dancers. And I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, dancers used to hate performance artists, and like they're totally different genres. But now they're some sort of like overlapping grounds. There's something new happening. So those things are good. Maybe we should sort of distinguish ourselves as professionals, yet we need to continue experimenting, expanding borders, because borders are only conceptual. If we say no borders, we can sort of spread out and break the borders. And maybe the borders are not lines, they're more like lands. It's not just like two dimensions, but it's more like space. So there are some spaces that we can walk around the borders.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, everybody, I think that everybody's inspired. And as Edith told us, this how to make this mysterious thing to connect people and change society. And I think, in fact, our artists love mysterious things to go after. This is the thing we love to chase. And well, I would like to thank you, Daisuke, for the presence, and of course Dudu for inviting you, and for all the effort that was made to make this connection happen for the first time. And I would like to well address in the name of everybody, I think, just the first time. Hope to see you more often online, and maybe offline, why not? Maybe in a close future, heading the 21st century. If anyone else would like to say anything before we close. Dudu?
I'm done.
Thanks a lot for everything.
Érica?
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Branca, Daniel,
Muito obrigada.
quem não se falou.
Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot.
Branquinha.
Thanks a lot.
Quer perguntar em português, Branquinha?
Yeah, gato e gata.
Gato.
Dudu, eu adorei a sua apresentação, adorei a apresentação dele também, e a única coisa que eu fiquei pensando, eu sempre fico pensando sobre a natureza dos trabalhos, ao que é que elas respondem, né? Isso numa palestra que o Deleuze deu para os cineastas em Paris, e ele falava que todo ato de criação responde a uma pergunta, a uma questão, a um problema, né? E aí eu fiquei pensando que as duas coisas, que fazendo uma intersecção da sua fala com a fala dele, e eu fiquei pensando que vocês estavam falando, os dois, sobre que a arte, essa arte, tanto a que você faz ou as que ele apresentou, elas respondem a um problema da catástrofe, elas respondem a... Quando você chamou o seu trabalho, né, a sua apresentação de Medo e Confiança, aí eu fiquei pensando, estão nas duas pontas, né, o medo e a confiança está na outra ponta, e o que ele falou também estava dentro desse contexto, dessa relação. Aí, a pergunta que eu teria para fazer é essa: se vocês acham que esses trabalhos, o seu principalmente, né, Dudu, porque eu vi que ele apresentou, mas são trabalhos que eu não conheço, eu não poderia falar sobre. Se além do devir, que você sempre fala do devir ambiente do seu trabalho, se não tem uma questão aí mais grave, e essa até anotei aqui, e que essa questão, se não seria assim, o que nos causa terror, o que nos causa pavor, né? O que nos tira a confiança e simultaneamente, o que nos dá confiança, quer dizer, qual é o limite, né, da nossa, se aquilo que nos causa desconfiança, se seria a diminuição da nossa potência. Fiquei achando que o seu trabalho, ele tinha como a pergunta motora, né, tem o devir ambiente, mas o que está ainda por trás disso, se não seria isso, o que nos causa, o que nos despotencializa, né? Tudo que você faz leva, né, eu vejo agora em todos os seus trabalhos isso. É a única pergunta que eu teria para você, se eu estou no caminho certo de entender o trabalho.
Obrigado, Branquinha. So I will first translate more or less what you talked to Daisuke too, because it's a question for addressed to both of us. And with this question, we will end our conversation in a golden key way. So what Branca was saying is that she attended to a lecture about Deleuze philosophy, which states that any act of creation respond to a question, right, to a issue, and that somehow both of our works respond to a issue that she somehow points us in some questions, which could be what's the cause of our fears or our panic or our I cannot find the word. Angústia is someone can translate angústia. Angústia is like anguish. Yeah, anguish. And what gives us trust, né? And somehow what she also points is that what causes the thing that causes us to not trust in something else is what actually makes us powerless, or somehow is if the cause of the mistrust is actually what make us so powerless? So that was her questions, if I could translate well. It has some more complexity because she went to some areas that I cannot remember specifically, but it's more like understanding more or less how the opposition of fear and trust, what's the relation of the position fear and trust in our artworks. So that's it. I will answer in English, then I kind of translate in Portuguese, then Daisuke answer and can be that way. So I won't be long. Branquinha, muito obrigado pela pergunta. É sempre um prazer te ter aqui e ter a sua leitura assim, tão perspicaz, né? E tão contínua na minha vida, porque afinal a gente está com esse doutorado aí, né? Então interessante essa pergunta, porque aquilo eu achei muito legal essa terceira, que você fala que aquilo que nos causa desconfiança é também aquilo que nos causa ou que nos promove impotência. Eu achei isso muito interessante, porque é o que a gente está falando até agora, aqui entre a gente, né? Que de uma forma o medo ele cria barreiras entre a gente que dificulta qualquer tipo de ação, não só ações artísticas, não só relações afetivas, mas também ações políticas ou resoluções, qualquer tipo de situação, ela fica limitada pelo medo, né? Então, quando eu criei esse trabalho, eu fiquei muito, assim, foi motivado pela relação com o Yuji, aquele fazendeiro, e porque de fato eu experienciei essa relação, né? Eu vi como que na forma como eu ia me relacionando com ele, a confiança que eu ia ganhando ia me trazendo um certo terreno para a gente existir no mesmo lugar, e ao mesmo tempo, e como essa construção ela é lenta, ela é dócil e ela é agradável. E ao mesmo tempo eu experienciei na mesma conversa o oposto, que seria você simplesmente tomar um golpe de machado e você perder todo esse terreno que você tem junto, toda essa conexão de amor que você tem com aquela pessoa, que é uma coisa que vai te, né, trazendo quase que um brilho nos olhos mesmo. Aquilo cai por terra e você tem medo, já pensa em questões técnicas e você já naturalmente desconfia, naturalmente começa a mentir. Você mente, você desconfia, você desfaz, ou seja, você age de uma forma exatamente de afastamento, né? Você parte para a impotência, na verdade. Se a gente está pensando aqui como a solução do mundo, a conectividade, o medo é a própria impotência, né? Porque com medo a gente não consegue se conectar. Então, eu achei muito legal essa pergunta e é muito bonito isso que você traz, que talvez realmente eu relendo os trabalhos agora, né? Muito em função do nosso trabalho aqui no AVX Lab, no festival, eu tive também talvez uma outra percepção digamos, da transversal que perpassa os trabalhos, que o dever ambiente talvez seja uma das questões, mas talvez essa relação que você coloca, ela é mais central mesmo, porque todos os trabalhos dependem de uma certa cooperação de outra pessoa, os trabalhos, né? E
eu acho que ela está na base de todas as perspectivas que você tem. Ela está na base, ela vai para todas as outras perspectivas.
Sim, queria uma leitura. Na horizontalização do trabalho, talvez isso fique mais, ressalte melhor. Eu achei também interessante. E o que muda pela terceira vez o tema do doutorado. Que é uma loucura, né? Que pesquisa algo vivo. Então, I will kind of resume a translation of my answer, then I pass to Daisuke. So what was telling to Branca, which was not presented to you, that she's my co-supervisor in my doctorate now, and she's a teacher at the art department in University of São Paulo. She's a colleague of Patricia Morin, which was here also with us, and so she's of the visual arts department and has a really extensive research and Deleuze in philosophy and Simondon philosophy too. So she has a really sharp eyes for art critic. So it's an honor to have her with us tonight. So I was answering her that somehow the sensation of mistrust or not trusting someone actually is really is the cause, or is what caused the lack of power that we feel in the sensation. As we are all agreeing that trust and collective thinking is kind of the way of getting out of this situation, or is one of the solutions that we can build in long term. So thinking like this makes us also think or reach a conclusion that mistrust is the cause of our lack of power. And somehow when we have fear, fear blocks the connections, fear blocks this kind of cloth that makes us all together, and brings us to, again to the 20th century, as you said before, as individuals in a same self-oriented life and so on. And she was telling me that maybe this is what is the leading vector of my works. And she's also addressing this question to you, if somehow you think that this sensation, these conditions, could be understood as a leading vector of your works.
Thank you, Branka, for the question. Thank you, Dudu, for the translation. I don't know if I can answer correctly, but the fear comes from unknown, and unknown creates various negativities like anxieties and so on. And yes, it does block you from being connected to the nature, friends, society, communities, etc., etc. And yes, trance and comfort comes from confidence. And I guess that the question is how you framework unknown, and it's totally up to each individual. And if you can sort of handle the unknown well, then you can build your confidence and you can get connected better with communities and nature. So if you have unknown, yes, we do not know what sort of living we are going to be in 21st century. So that is unknown. And if you cannot think positively about it, if you're not eager enough to learn or experience new, then you will go to anxiety and fear. But if you frame unknown as something new, something interesting, exciting, then you can build confidence, then you can feel comfortable, and you can build trust and get connected to nature and communities and society. So I think how you see unknown is something that we need to think about. And I think I'm not too knowledgeable about philosophy as Branka. So if I talk 2 minutes more, then you can criticize me so easily. So I will stop now.
Thank you, Daisuke. I kind of translate what Daisuke said in a synthetic way. So what Daisuke was saying was that o medo vem do desconhecido, né? E o desconhecido causa ansiedade e outros sentimentos negativos, como a gente estava comentando. E confiança e conforto vem dessa confidência, né? Da confiança. Se a gente puder lidar com esse desconhecido de uma forma melhor, a gente pode acessar essa confiança, se reconectar com a natureza e com a nossa própria espiritualidade. Então, se você não consegue experienciar o novo, né, sem o medo, né, sem ter medo, você nunca vai conseguir construir essa confiança, nunca vai conseguir construir essa sensação de conectividade, coletividade, né? Então, é como se ele tá trazendo que aquilo que a gente estava comentando, é como se toda essa relação que a gente, ou seja, o princípio de reconectar, ou se reconectar com a natureza, com a espiritualidade, com a coletividade, ela passa para a gente ter confiança de alguma forma nesse novo e no que a gente não conhece, e dessa forma viver de um modo diferente, né? Viver de um modo que não crie mais barreiras, né? Da forma como a gente vivia até então. Muito massa.
Posso só falar uma coisinha para fechar, assim, só rapidinho? É que às vezes é uma delícia conversar aqui, mas às vezes eu me sinto dentro da orquestra do Titanic, né? Assim, porque o capital, a lógica do lucro, ele não é difícil deter isso, né? Porque continuam destruindo a terra, continuam tirando petróleo, aqui estão construindo vários prédios, destruindo as casas. Quer dizer, a lógica do lucro, ela leva a gente para a destruição, porque a terra é curta, né? Então, estou me sentindo um pouco como na orquestra do Titanic, sabe assim? Mas, enfim, não quero ser coisa, mas é que tem mesmo um capital que se não detém, ele leva a gente para a destruição, né? Então, não sei, a terra como recurso precisa ser mudada aí, né? Não pode ser olhada como recurso, né? Mas como mãe, enfim. Mas é só um sentimento aí que deu.
É isso aí, Nelly, mas vamos lá.
Vamos lá, vamos continuar tocando.
É só um sentimento, mas é um sentimento muito importante, né, Nelly?
É uma coisa assim, irmão.
Vou até a última música, a gente toca junto.
Conta pro
Daisuke, sorry. Nelly was saying that she feels sometimes like the playing the orchestra of the Titanic. An artist, playing while the ship are sinking. And just like the inertia of this capitalism that, are dragging all the things with it. And as you said, we have to give it away and rethink it all to get into the 21st century, reinvent ourselves. Even with this, she feels playing sometimes in the orchestra of Titanic. And I answered her that she don't have to worry because I will play with her till the last music.
Good translation.
Good translation. Well, I think you got to wrap it up and put a close on it. It was such a memorable evening here, here in the other side of the planet. Well, what else, people? Dudu, the Metro, just say a big thanks for this discussion, even for those who have been sharing silently their confidence with us, their trust.
Beautiful, very beautiful. Thank you, Lucas and Demetrio, to make this all possible. Thank you, Daisuke, for accepting our invitation, and thank you all for coming. I think it's never enough to be like this together, even if by screen. But it's always something positive and inspiring, to meet you guys all and to talk and to see your faces, right? I really miss a hug or something more like Brazilian. But, well, that's what we have for now. So I'd like to thank you all. And once again, thank the Field Trip Project for making all this possible with the backpacks. Without the backpacks, which was the beginning of all this conversation, we wouldn't be here. So thank you, Daisuke. And well, so if you don't have any more questions, we could end our meeting now and start our evening in a very beautiful way. So I wish you all a beautiful week and a beautiful weekend.
Yeah. And a good afternoon for Daisuke.
Yeah, Daisuke is going to hike, right? You're going to walk the mountains. Oh, nice.
That's it.
Yeah.
Send us a
hi.
photo.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Daisuke. Oh,
much obrigado.
Obrigado, gente.
Obrigado,
Foi
gente.
incrível.
Obrigada.